Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Vandenberg Space Force Base. I'm Will Robinson Smith. I'll be conducting our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We're broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. Following last night's, or really this morning's still, scrub of the Astronus Block 2 mission, otherwise known as Astronus from One to Many, we turn from the East Coast here to the West Coast, where SpaceX will once again prepare to launch one of its Falcon 9 rockets, this time in service of a host of customers as it makes its second mid-inclination rideshare mission launch called Bandwagon 2. Falcon 9 set to lift off from Space Launch Complex 4 East, or Slick 4E, there at Vandenberg. At the time you see here on your screen, 3:34 a.m. Pacific, 6:34 a.m. Eastern, 11:34 UTC for our friends joining around the world. Want to thank the little more than 800 of you who are up with us at what is quite an odd hour for many of us. So appreciate you starting off your weekend here with us here at Spaceflight Now. If you're coming back after being with us for our live coverage of Astronus from One to Many, welcome back. If this is your first launch of the weekend, welcome in. I want to thank our moderator in the live chat, Callistia Lee, for being a trooper, being back with us and holding down the fort in the live chat. You can help out Callistia, make her job a little bit easier by not using all caps, being respectful of one another. We respectfully ask that you converse in the live chat explicitly and only in English. And also, this is not a politics podcast. There are plenty of other venues around YouTube and other social media sites in which to engage in good, robust political conversation. This is not one of them. Currently T-minus 21 minutes and counting to the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. SpaceX has confirmed that they have begun propellant load for today's launch, and they say all systems are looking good. As mentioned, this mission will see the launch of 30 different payloads heading up to a mid-inclination orbit. Whole host of customers on board today's flight, including Aeroscience and Technology, Exo Launch, Hawkeye 360, Maverick Space Systems, Sidus Space, from right here on the Space Coast, Tomorrow Companies Inc., Korea ADD, True Anomaly, and Think Orbital. As we continue on with the count, we'll talk a little bit more about today's mission and the booster that's flying it. For now, let's go ahead and talk about the countdown timeline, the events that we're looking for in a nominal progression of this Falcon 9 rocket. Again, SpaceX has confirmed that fueling is underway, so we'll step through this fairly quickly. Before I do, though, just want to thank our channel member community for being with us today. They make these live launch coverage opportunities possible. So thanks to folks like Terrapin, Tom, Earl, Wilson, Mick Bradley, Joni Mahoney, Sulfur for Lunch, SoCal Gloria, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments in 4K. And in the spirit of that, want to welcome in our two newest channel members, Tosro1 and Sean Kofi, both joining us the channel membership at the Pad Leader level. Welcome aboard to the both of you. We're glad to have you with us. That's a little bit of housekeeping. If you have a comment or question about this mission or other happenings in spaceflight, or just want to offer some words or some support this morning, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature. And not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we continue on through the count, but you'll be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that is always greatly appreciated. As I mentioned, they've gone through a few different milestones SpaceX has this morning, so we'll go ahead and step through what is in the past fairly quickly to get to what is still yet ahead. About the T-minus 38-minute mark is when they gave their go-ahead for the start of prop load, which began at T-minus 35 minutes with the loading of RP-1, or a rocket-grade kerosene, on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages, as well as liquid oxygen on board the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 30 minutes is when they started loading cryogenic helium into the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage. Same began on the second stage just a few minutes thereafter. And helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. T-minus 23 minutes is when the second stage RP-1 loading wrapped up. T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the strong back chill down process began. It's when they're conditioning the feed lines prior to second stage LOX load. We have eyes on the rocket. We see that evidenced by the big vent that begins at about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds and wraps up, right about now. And that'll lead us to the next milestone, beginning now less than 30 seconds from this point in time. That is the loading of liquid oxygen on board the Falcon 9's second stage, beginning at the 16-minute mark. On the list of things yet to come, we have the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket. That begins at T-minus 7 minutes. It's when they flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing, the turbo pumps, helping to protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes before liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank is full. At T-minus 4.5 minutes, the strong back recheck process gets underway. It's when they open up the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings, and the transporter erector, or the strong back, will incline about 1.5 degrees away from the 13 degrees here in Vandenberg. Stays in that position until liftoff. Following retraction of the strong back at the T-minus 3-minute mark is when the first stage LOX tank is full. Same will be true on the second stage about a minute thereafter, at which point the Falcon 9 rocket will be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, when we hear the call of the Falcon 9 is in startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director gives their go for launch 45 seconds before liftoff. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 for a T0 liftoff. And that is, once again, just around the corner here, coming up at 3:34 a.m. Pacific, 6:34 a.m. Eastern, 11:34 UTC, or in T-minus 13 minutes and 57 seconds. We're now T minus 9 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. About 2.5 minutes away from the engine chill down sequence. The trajectory of this mission is a bit of a funky one here, so unfortunately we don't have a good trajectory map to show you, but essentially once the Falcon 9 rocket leaves the pad, it will fly due south and then make a bit of a left-hand turn, a dogleg maneuver, if you will, to set the rocket on a 45-degree inclination trajectory. At T minus 9 minutes and 4 seconds. Unclear if SpaceX may have made a slight adjustment to its T0, noticing a little bit more of a difference between our countdown clock and what's being portrayed by SpaceX there at the base of the screen. At this point, though, we will rely on the SpaceX countdown clock as we are ticking down to this planned launch. This is a graphic showing the difference between the mid-inclination orbit, which will be used today. The sun synchronous orbit is what SpaceX uses in its transporter missions. Coming up on the engine chill down sequence here in the next 17 seconds. T minus 6 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. Heard the call for stage one RP1 load being complete. We'll note at the top of the rocket stack, or just above the inner stage, there's a gray band running along the second stage there. That's a thermal protection component that's added when there's typically a long coast phase that's needed for a mission. According to SpaceX, the reason that they are not going to be showing upper stage views and haven't published any type of a timeline as far as deployment of these various 30 payloads is because one of them, the Korea ADD, is a South Korean reconnaissance satellite, and therefore it classifies everything around it. SpaceX commentator notes that one of the fairing halves is flying for an 18th time, the other for its 14th time. The call for strong back retract pressurization is in work. This particular first stage booster B1071 is going to be going for its 21st flight today. I'll note just a few of the missions that it has supported during its time. It has launched 3 missions for the National Reconnaissance Office, those being NROL 87, which was its first flight. That was followed by NROL 85. This booster first flew back on February 2nd of 2022, by the way. This booster also supported the SWOT mission, or Surface Water and Ocean Topography, on behalf of NASA and French space agency CNES. It also launched a pair of transporter rideshare missions, Transporter 8 with 72 satellites on board and Transporter 9 with 113. And one other notable launch I'll mention, back on May 22nd of this year, launched NROL 146, that third and most recent mission for the NRO, with a batch of Starshield satellites on board. Now T-minus 3 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. We're coming up on the point of first stage liquid oxygen load being complete. Call for stage 1 LOX load being complete. Appreciate all of the 5,500 plus of you who are joining us live this morning. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us. Lots more folks to find their way into this live coverage in these final couple of minutes before liftoff. Also want to thank Westswell for a $10 super chat. Really appreciate that. Who says, good morning. Put this in the coffee fund. The space effort isn't just those doing it. It includes those covering it. Certainly appreciate you recognizing the efforts of those of us in the space coverage community and the toll that it does take. I also want to thank Flippers79 Flip DS for gifting a Spacefly Now membership. Appreciate that. And to our newest channel member, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank Flippers in live chat if you haven't already. Weather here at Vandenberg, 90% favorable for liftoff here in less than 2 minutes. The range is ready to support, and we do have confirmation that LOX load has wrapped up on the second stage. Ground gas closeouts now beginning. It's the venting you're seeing from the strong back. Also want to thank Janet Cook for joining us as channel membership at the pad leader level. As we're coming up on the final minute before a liftoff, we'll hear the call momentarily that the Falcon 9 is entering startup.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Good call from SpaceX. And now, last but certainly not least, we are awaiting the SpaceX launch director to give their go for launch. That's coming up here momentarily.
LD is go for launch.
And with that final go for launch, we are cruising on in to the point that we reached most recently with the Astronus Block 2 mission. We'll see if things fare better for SpaceX out here at Vandenberg Space Force Base. For now, we'll go ahead and step back, listen to the final 20 plus seconds of the count, and we'll be back with you with additional commentary on the other side of liftoff.
T-minus 15 seconds. T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. And liftoff of the Falcon 9. Go SpaceX, go Bandwagon 2.
Vehicle pitching downrange. Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
We've had good callouts from Mission Control that everything is looking good or nominal, as you're hearing from Mission Control. And these nighttime views, of course, mean that we are about about 40 seconds into the launch of our Bandwagon 2.
Power and telemetry are nominal.
Confirmation there that power and telemetry are both looking good. And we are currently throttling down the rocket to prepare for max Q, the point of maximum.
Supersonic.
With that call out, we know that Falcon 9 is moving faster than the speed of sound. And again, max Q is our next major milestone here.
Max Q.
That confirmation is important because max Q is the point of maximum aerodynamic stress on the vehicle. And with that, we now have several
started.
confirmation that we're beginning to chill the MVAC engine ahead of second engine start 1, which is just one of several events that we have coming up in quick succession here. Our next major milestone will be main engine cutoff, or MECO, where we will shut down the 9 Merlin engines on board the first stage. Shortly thereafter, we'll have stage separation, where that pusher within the inner stage will be activated to separate the first and second stages from each other. Then we'll flip the first stage around so it can make its way back to Earth, which you'll hear called out as Stage 1 flip, then Second Engine Start 1, or SES 1, before the start of our boost back burn.
Main engine cutoff.
There's confirmation of
Stage
MECO
separation confirmed.
and stage separation, with great views on your screen right there.
MVAC ignition.
Stage back startup.
And there we had confirmation that we have lit our MVAC engine on board the second stage, and you've got great views on your screen right now of the boost back burn for our first stage booster. The next milestone we're expecting to hear called out by Mission Control is fairing separation. During fairing separation, those 2 fairing halves, which again are flight proven for today's mission, are going to be jettisoned away from one another before falling back to Earth. SpaceX will attempt to recover those fairing halves again tonight. Reusability is key to lowering the cost of access to space, which is critical to enable
Fairing separation confirmed.
future scientific research. And with that, we do have fairing separation confirmed.
Stage back shutdown.
And confirmation that our boost back burn has ended.
And so far, a nominal flight with this Falcon 9 rocket. Once again, want to emphasize that because of the payload on board on behalf of South Korea, SpaceX is not showing any upper stage views, so they will keep their cameras pointed exclusively, well, here in the Mission Control Center at their headquarters in Hawthorne, California, and or with the Falcon 9 first stage booster. At 2 plus 4 minutes, 14 seconds and counting. Next milestone that we're looking for is coming up at T plus 6 minutes and 32 seconds. It's the entry burn, which today will last roughly 20 seconds in duration. while SpaceX is not providing any upper stage views, notably they are still sharing what appears to be good telemetry data from the second stage. Typically, when there's a classified payload on the second stage, they will not have any information on the second stage that is broadcast publicly. So interesting that they still have it up there. We're now just about 30 seconds away from the start of the first stage entry burn. Presumably SpaceX will go back to the onboard camera views of the first stage once that entry burn does begin. First stage booster targeting not a drone ship today, but coming back for a landing over at LZ4. Here's the start of the entry burn. If successful, this will mark the 22nd booster landing at LZ4 and the 386th booster landing to date. With the conclusion of that entry burn, you can see the speedometer has dropped quite dramatically. Coming up on the start of the landing burn here in just about 30 seconds. That landing burn set to begin at T plus 7 minutes and 49 seconds. As we mentioned during our broadcast for the Astronus mission last night, and as the SpaceX launch commentator just noted, here in the Northern Hemisphere, we have just entered, or just passed the winter solstice. Landing burn call out, and there you see it visually on the screen. This mission marks the first launch and now landing attempt following the winter solstice. Let's listen in.
Landing leg deployed.
Impact shutdown.
We did get great views of those landing
Stage
legs
1 landing confirmed.
and have confirmation of stage 1 landing confirmed.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And nominal orbit insertion for our Bandwagon 2 payloads on board the second stage. With that successful landing at landing zone 4, this booster has completed 21 flights, and SpaceX has now landed 386 orbital class rockets.
And with the good landing of the first stage booster and the classified nature of one of the payloads on board this mid-inclination rideshare mission, SpaceX is about to conclude any views that will be transmitted to us today. We'll go ahead and hang here with views at Hawthorne until right now, when SpaceX pulls that away. For those who are tracking the progress of the Astronus from one to many mission, if you did not see our post on X earlier, SpaceX is targeting a launch attempt again in the overnight hours coming up tonight. The launch window is set to open right at midnight here on the East Coast. And as you may have noted by looking at the calendar, Christmas is right around the corner. And so a late night launch is going to be in the cards from here to the other side of Christmas. It's part of the Federal Aviation Administration's holiday restrictions. Launch window is 129 minutes. That once again opens at midnight Eastern Standard Time. With a good liftoff and landing of the first stage booster on this mission, we're going to go ahead and pivot to our mission stats as they currently stand. Before we do, want to thank Roddy Mom 12 for marking 10 months with us as a channel member at the pad leader level, who says, "Thank you, Spaceflight Now and Will, and way to go, SpaceX." And with that, let's turn to the mission stats. This was the 21st flight for this particular booster, B-1071 in the SpaceX fleet, the 413th Falcon 9 launch to date. This was the 128th Falcon 9 launch of 2024, the 357th Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. Including the 2 Falcon Heavy missions, this was SpaceX's 130th orbital launch of the year, the 134th orbital launch within the last 365 days. This was the 105th orbital launch from SpaceX from Space Launch Complex 4 East at Vandenberg, and the 194th overall launch orbitally from that pad. Moving on to some recovery stats, this was the 22nd landing at Landing Zone 4. That marked the 80th landing, and the 386th Falcon booster landing to date. Finally, with some industry stats, this particular launch was the 47th from California on the year, the 136th orbital launch from U.S. soil, the 149th orbital launch from a U.S. rocket company, and the 251st orbital launch from around the globe. 7 launch mishaps on the year now at this point, including one more to tack on from Japan. So here is where our pie chart currently stands. U.S. on the precipice of 150 orbital launches on the year so far has now dipped below 60% of the pie for the first time in quite some time. China, 27% of the pie with its 67 launches. Russia has launched 16 times, holding 6%. Japan with its 7 launches, just off of the podium at 3%. Not a whole lot more that we can report about this mission, since SpaceX is not publicizing the duration of the timeline, but presumably will be posting on its social channels following the deployment of the other non-classified payloads today. Or they'll just do a batch notification that everyone has been deployed. But we'll keep our eyes on social media for further updates on that. And once again, looking forward to the currently scheduled launch of Astronus from One to Many mission, set to lift off no earlier than the stroke of midnight here on the East Coast in the overnight hours tonight, 0500 UTC for our friends joining from around the world. I want to thank Callistia Lee, our wonderful moderator, who's on tap today in the live chat. Big thanks once again to Aussie Space Girl and Astro Joe for helping us out with the Astronus launch overnight. Our thanks to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of this broadcast, and thanks to you for wherever you're watching from. We'll be back in action with our live coverage of Astronus mission about an hour prior to liftoff. So be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications. That way you don't miss the start of the stream, and we'll see you back there then. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Be good to yourselves, be good to others. And we will see you next time, folks. And until that point, bye-bye.